Cultural refinement beyond empty gestures from the Analects of Confucius. Confucius said of the Ji family, they have 8 rows of dancers perform ing in their courtyard. If they can condone this, what are they not capable of? According to later ritual texts, different ranks in society were allowed different numbers of dancers to perform outside the ancestral hall during ceremonial occasions. The Son of Heaven allowed 8 rows of 8 dancers, feudal lords 6 rows, ministers 4 rows, and official 2 rows. Although he was de facto ruler of Lu, the head of the Ji family officially held only the position of minister, and his use of 8 dancers thus represented an outrageous usurpation of the ritual prerogatives of the Zhou king. When making offerings to their ancestors, the 3 families had the Yong Ode performed during the clearing away of the sacrificial vessels. The master quoted a line from the ode. Assisting were the feudal lords, the Son of Heaven, solemn and stately. Adding, what relevance could this possibly have to the ancestral hall of the 3 families? The Yong Ode, as Confucius points out by quoting one of its couplets, describes the court of the Son of Heaven. As Brooks and Brooks note, the 2 preceding lines in the stanza are, slow and solemn they draw nigh / till all are ranged in panoply. As a recessional hymn, it was probably sung by a chorus, who narrated, as though it were happening, the sacrifice that had just concluded, 1998-79. Here again we have an instance of the 3 families usurping the ritual prerogatives of the Zhou king. The master said, a man who is not good, what has he to do with ritual? A man who is not good, what has he to do with music? Although it serves as a general statement concerning the relationship of internal disposition to Confucian practice, this comment is probably more specifically directed at the head of the Ji family and the other leading families of Lu criticized. A passage in the history of the Han, after quoting this line, explains. The point is that a person who is not good does not have the means to apply himself. Not having the means to apply himself, he is unable to practice ritual and music. Even if he has many other talents, they will only be used to do no good. During the master's age, ritual and music were under attack by the ministers of Lu, who greedily usurped the prerogatives of the king and mutually followed the established habits of corruption, and practiced wrongness so that it triumphed over what was right. Lin Fang asked about the roots of ritual. The master exclaimed, what a noble question! When it comes to ritual, it is better to be spare than extravagant. When it comes to mourning, it is better to be excessively sorrowful than fastidious. Lin Fang is usually identified as a man of Lu, and presumably shared Confucius' concern that his fellow citizens were neglecting the roots and attending to the superficial branches of ritual practice, which is why he is commended by Confucius for his question. When it comes to ritual, is it harmony that is valued, but if one is to err, it should be on the side of the roots, that is, the emotions that ideally inform and motivate the ritual forms. Sparse ritual paraphernalia backed by genuine respect is better than empty ritual excess, and grief-induced lapses in ritual forms of mourning, e.g., Confucius' own excesses upon the death of Yan Hui, are more easily countenanced than cool, emotionless perfection. Zhu Xi is probably correct in linking this theme to the relationship of emotional substance over cultural form. Although here in Book 3 the importance of substance over cultural form is emphasized by Confucius, in other passages we see form being stressed over substance. Probably the desirability of both being balanced is Confucius' ultimate position, and his favoring of one over another is merely a response to the pedagogical needs of the moment. The master said, the E&D barbarians, even with their rulers, are still inferior to the Chinese states without their rulers. The E&D were tribes living to the east and north, respectively, of China proper in Confucius' time. They had some sort of political organization but did not follow the rituals of the Zhou. Huang Can and others are probably correct in seeing this as another jibe at the three families of Lu. They wield political power as do the barbarian rulers, but their breaches of ritual propriety make them no better than the E or D, and it would be preferable for Lu to remain ritually correct, and thus, Chinese, in the proper sense, even if this meant going without any ruler at all. The head of the Ji family made a sacrificial pilgrimage to Mt Tai. The master said to Ran Qiu, "Were you not able to prevent this?" Ran Qiu replied, "I was not." The master exclaimed, "Oh! That one would ever have to say that Mt Tai was not the equal of Lin Fang." Mt Tai is one of the sacred mountains of China, located in present-day Shandong province. The offering of sacrifices to sacred mountains in the form of food and jade items, which were ritually arranged and then buried, was the prerogative of the feudal lord who ruled the region in which the mountain was located. Mt Tai straddled the border of Lu and Qi, and received offerings from both states. The head of the Ji family, of course, was a minister and not a feudal lord, and so his offering represented a violation of ritual norms. At the time, Ran Qiu was serving as an official under the head of the Ji family, and thus was in a position to dissuade him from this ritual error, but he apparently lacked courage or influence. Bao Xian explains the master's closing comment, "Spirits do not accept offerings that violate ritual." Even Lin Fang previously knew enough to ask about ritual, so how could anyone imagine that the spirit of Mt Tai would somehow be less perspicacious than he? It was with a desire to slander of Mt Tai that this sacrifice was performed. The master said, "Surely archery can serve as an illustration of the fact that the gentleman does not compete." Before mounting the stairs to the archery hall, gentlemen bow and defer to one another, and after descending from the hall they mutually offer up toasts. This is how a gentleman competes. Archery was one of the classic 6 arts in which a gentleman was trained. It was a highly ritualized activity, with careful attention being given to age and rank, and everyone participating in a formal drinking ceremony at the conclusion of the competition. Archery also served in the warring states as a standard metaphor for the overall task of self-cultivation. The word for hitting the bullseye, zhong, was most commonly understood in its metaphoric meaning of the mean of virtue, and, as with virtue, success in archery could only be obtained by a person focused on his inner state rather than external success. As Luan Zhao explains, when it comes to archery, the gentleman focuses upon his art as a means of illuminating the lessons he has learned and scrutinizes his virtue in order to monitor his moral worthiness. He repeatedly bows and defers to others in order to perfect ritual propriety, and vener atesh the 5 excellences in order to inspire others to be morally instructed. Competing does not at all help one to achieve victory. One must seek for victory within oneself. This is why the etiquette of archery dictates that, if you miss the center of the target, turn and look for the cause within yourself. One seeks the bullseye by means of deference and self-cultivation, not for the sake of competing for victory in order to shame others. Thus, we also Zixia asked, an ode says, "Her artful smile, with its alluring dimples. Her beautiful eyes, so clear. The unadorned upon which to paint." What does this mean? The master said, the application of colors comes only after a suitable unadorned background is present. Zixia said, so it is the rites that come after? The master said, it is you, Zixia, who has awakened me to the meaning of these lines. It is only with someone like you that I can begin to discuss the odes. Again we have a disciple making the sort of conceptual leap that Confucius required of his students. The point grasped by Zixia is that the adornment provided by the rites is meant to build upon appropriate native emotions or tendencies. Just as all of the cosmetics in the world are of no avail if the basic lines of the face are not pleasing, so is the refinement provided by ritual forms of no help to one lacking in native substance. An even stronger expression of the importance of substance is found in the record of ritual, just as that which is naturally sweet can be further harmonized through cooking, and just as colors may be applied to a white background, so a person who is dutiful and trustworthy can be allowed to learn the rites. Here the virtues of dutifulness and trustworthiness are presented as native talents that are the prerequisites for moral education. The master said, "As for the rites of the Xia dynasty, I can speak of them, but there is little remaining in the state of Qi to document them. As for the rites of the Shang dynasty, I can speak of them, but there is little remaining in the state of Song to document them. This is because there is not much in the way of culture or moral worthies left in either state. If there were something there, then I would be able to document them." Qi was a minor state in which the remnants of the Xia royal line were enfeoffed after their defeat by the Shang, and Song was the state where the remnants of the Shang were enfeoffed after their defeat by the Zhou. Neither of these states was successful in preserving their cultural traditions, unlike the state of Lu, the home of the Zhou cultural tradition, where the essence of Zhou culture could still be found. The most cogent interpretation of this passage is that of Zheng Ruxi, who explains, "Qi was a minor state in which the remnants of the Xia royal line were enfeoffed after their defeat by the Shang, and Song was the state where the remnants of the Shang were enfeoffed after their defeat by the Zhou. Neither of these states was successful in preserving their cultural traditions, unlike the state of Lu, the home of the Zhou cultural tradition, where the essence of Zhou culture could still be found." The most cogent interpretation of this passage is that of Zheng Ruxi, who explains, "Qi and Song had lost the ritual practices of the Xia and Shang, as evidenced by the fact that there was no remaining culture or moral worthies left in these states that could document these cultures. Lu, on the other hand, was not like this. With regard to culture, it still possessed the classic documents, and with regard to worthiness, it possessed the master. How is it that none of the rulers and ministers of Lu saw fit to examine this evidence? Thus, in making this comment, the master did not really have Qi or Song in mind, but was instead using the examples of Qi and Song to express his opinion, for it is in fact particularly with regard to Lu that the subtle point of his words are. The master said, "As for that part of the sacrifice that comes after the pouring of the ceremonial libation, I have no desire to witness it." There is a great deal of debate over how to understand this passage. There is general consensus that the sacrifice was a special type of ancestor sacrifice, directed toward the ultimate progenitor of one's ancestral line. Some commentators believe that all aristocratic lines had their own sacrifice that they were authorized to perform, and that Confucius' disapproval is directed toward the manner in which the sacrifice was being carried out in Lu, either sloppily or with an usurpation of paraphernalia, music and dance that were properly the prerogative of the Zhou king. Others, citing a line found in 2 chapters of the record of ritual that says, "According to ritual, only a king can perform the argue that the mentioned here is a specific ritual directed to the progenitor of the Zhou royal line 6 and properly performed only in the great ancestral temple of Lu mentioned. The performance of this ceremony, under this reading, was the sole prerogative of the Zhou royal line. As Mao Qiling puts it, The Di is fundamentally a grand sacrifice limited to kings. Both the Places in the Bright Hall and Summary Account of Sacrifices say, because he viewed him as having made the most meritorious contributions in the entire world, King Qing dedicated to the Duke of Zhou an important sacrifice. Thus, he sacrificed to the originating progenitor of his line, establishing the ancestral hall of the founding king, where from the beginning the ritual and music appropriate to the Son of Heaven could be performed. However, in Confucius' time, the various lords began randomly employing this sacrifice. Their action thus fell under the category of ritual violation, and this is why the master had no desire to witness it. This accords completely with Someone asked for an explanation of the Di sacrifice. The master said, "I do not understand it. One who understood it could handle the world as if he had it right here," and he pointed to the palm of his hand. Of course, the unspoken implication is that there is no one in Lu who really understands the Di, especially the three families, who have been shamelessly performing it in gross violation of ritual norms. The ability of a properly performed ritual, especially those having to do with filial piety, such as the Di sacrifice to one's ancestors, to order the entire world in an wu-wei fashion is expressed particularly strongly here, but has parallels in such passages. Sacrifice as if they were present means that, when sacrificing to the spirits, you should comport yourself as if the spirits were present. The master said, "If I am not fully present at the sacrifice, it is as if I did not sacrifice at all." To sacrifice, as if the spirits were present, means to do so with an attitude of reverence and awe. There is no attribution for the first line, and its form, cryptic text followed by an expanded, explanatory version, suggests that it might be a fragment from a lost ritual text interpolated by a later editor. Whether the master's words or not, it nonetheless clearly harmonizes with the comment from Confucius that follows. Although some commentators take being present in the second line in its literal sense, i.e., being physically present at the sacrifice, not sending a proxy in one's stead, the sense of the first line suggests that what is at issue is psychological or inner presence. Wang Sunjia asked, "What do you think about the saying? It is better to pay homage to the kitchen stove than to the corner shrine." The master replied, "This is not so. Once you have incurred the wrath of heaven, there is no one to whom you can pray for help." There are many ways to understand this passage. Taken literally, it is a cynical piece of peasant lore, meaning that it is better to be well-fed than to waste food on sacrifices to the ancestors. Despite Confucius' agnosticism concerning the existence of the spirits, such a crudely pragmatic argument against ritual traditions would clearly be anathema to him. There are also a host of metaphorical interpretations of the passage that take the folk saying as a coded reference to the current state of affairs in Wei, where the questioner, Wang Sunjia, was a minister. The corner shrine was traditionally located in the southwest corner of one's house, and was a specially venerated location where sacrifices to one's ancestors were carried out. The kitchen stove, on the other hand, was of no particular ritual significance, but was the focus of the family's everyday attention, and was therefore of much more practical importance. Some interpretations argue that the corner shrine refers metaphorically to the respected inner circle of ministers around the Lord of Wei, Kong Anggua's view, or to the Lord of Wei himself, Zhu Shi's view, who had in fact only nominal power, and that the kitchen stove refers to the real wielder of power in Wei, Wang Sunjia. Under this reading, Wang Sun is advising Confucius, who had just arrived in Wei, possibly seeking an official position after losing his position in Lu, to pay homage to him rather than to his nominal superiors. This, however, would be a violation of ritual, and thus a crime against heaven, and Confucius therefore rebukes him. Other interpretations see this saying as Wang Xuan's attempt to justify his abandoning service under the remnants of the Zhou royal line to take up a position with the much more powerful feudal lord of Wei. As Luan Zhao explains, the saying means that, in theory, the corner shrine is honored, but is not actually served in practice, whereas the kitchen stove, nominally not worthy of respect, is where one focuses one's attention. At the time the House of Zhou was weak and in decline, and real power was in the hands of the feudal lords. Wang Sun gave up service under Zhou to take up a position under Wei, and therefore uses this saying as a way to justify his actions to Confucius. Confucius' answer is intended to make it clear that, just as there is nothing greater than heaven and the spirits, no one should be honored more than one's king, that is, that one should in fact serve that which one honors in theory and not pay homage to that which is not worthy of respect.